Hey, welcome to the Rooted in the Word podcast. I'm Rob Armstrong, the pastor here at Harrisburg Baptist Church in Tupelo, Mississippi. Welcome to episode 38. Listen, episode 37 was in kind of two parts, Judges and Ruth. Just really great opportunities to think and to talk about those books. And in episode 38, we began focusing on the book of 1 Samuel. And in particular, I really want to narrow in on something that I believe is really helpful for us, especially in just our day-to-day relationships with the Lord, helping our lives to be focused on what is most important. I want to read for us from 1 Samuel chapter 7. In verse 3, it says, "And Samuel said to all the house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, then put away the foreign gods and the Ashtoreth from among you, and direct your heart to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines." God doesn't feel any differently today than he did then. That he calls us as his people to remove the foreign gods, as Samuel tells them, the idols, the false gods, the sin and the worldliness and the passions and the desires of our flesh. God says to remove those, to get those out, and to put our hearts and our minds and our lives on him. That effort and that work is not new to Scripture. We have seen it already. If you've been reading through with us this year and reading through the Bible, we've seen it many times over. Just Deuteronomy comes to mind. But yet, while we've seen it before and we've heard it before, loving God and serving him only, it takes up your whole life. And it takes your whole life. Like, it's not just that it fills the space of your life. I mean, it takes your whole life, because we don't ever stop. Like, there's no end to that for us. And so as you're reading through and reflecting on what you read as you read through the book of 1 Samuel, be struck with the call that God brings to them through Samuel to return to the Lord. And just as he says, if you're returning to the Lord with all your heart. And here's the thing, it's possible that you could be coming back to the Lord, but not coming with your whole heart. Because if you're coming with your whole heart, then you got to empty everything else. You got to drop it all, leave it behind. Don't bring it with you. You can't come running to the Lord clutching all these sins and struggles and stuff that you know are rebellious and against him and bad for you. You can't run up clutching and say, "Okay, I'm here." No, you got to leave it. I did youth ministry as a paid staff member for a really long time in the life of youth ministry. I want to say probably close to 14-ish years. I had the privilege to serve on church staff in different places as a youth minister. And man, one of the things that you go through in youth ministry is just teenagers. I mean, I love them. I absolutely love them. But man, they don't listen. And then when they do listen, sometimes they don't care. They just think they know better. And when you take, say, 100 teenagers and you're loading them up on a couple of buses and saying, "Hey, we're going to camp for a week," and you give everybody a sheet of paper, and here's all the things that you can bring and all the things that you can't bring. And, I would always be funny and silly and say things like, "Hey, don't bring fireworks, and, don't bring this." And then I would always be, "Please don't bring Axe body spray, because nobody likes how that smells and it's never going to help you attract a girl." And I just put all that kind of stuff on the list. But then, like, we really meant that, though. Like, I actually did mean it, even on the Axe body spray. But, like, we meant, like, there are things you cannot bring. There are things not to bring. And one of the things that I would always tell them to leave at home was this is crazy to think about in 2024, but back when I Gen Xer, was a youth minister, I would tell them, don't bring your iPod. Don't bring your MP3 player. Don't bring your CD player. Leave that stuff home. I had the benefit of doing youth ministry before cell phones were widespread as far as iPhones. And so that didn't even exist for most of the youth ministry days. So I tell our youth minister here at Harrisburg all the time, like, the way I did things, I don't know works now. The priorities can be the same, but it's a whole different world. But you go through their stuff, and you just see these kids, like, they're just clutching onto things. I can't leave this. I can't leave this. I can't leave this. And the same thing happens today. Like, you should be able to put your phone down for a little while. And people have a hard time doing that. And so you got to picture Israel, like, they're saying they want to turn to the Lord. And so Samuel looks at them and says, so listen, if you're returning to the Lord with all your heart, you really do have to leave all that behind. Like, it can't come on the bus with you. Because if you bring it on the bus with you, you're not going to be focused on the Lord. So one of the things that I always try to do as a student minister was, when we did retreats and did camps and did conferences, was to say, can we just give God these few days? Because if you can't give God these few days, maybe you don't need to go, was kind of my attitude. And what Samuel's telling the people of Israel is, if you're going to give yourself to the Lord, you got to leave that stuff behind. Like, you're in the mess you're in, as far as Israel's concerned, because you keep turning to these worldly idols, these ways of worship, these incredibly sexual false gods. And one of the major ways to worship these false gods was through sexual activity, and like with temple prostitutes or each other. And Samuel's like, though, which is a good word for us, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, then. And God is still an if-then God. Jesus said, if anyone wants to come after me, then he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. God has not quit being an if-then God. And so because God hasn't quit being an if-then God, we still have that kind of if-then relationship with him, which is something that I lose track of. I think many of us lose track of, and we're just like, well, God is going to be doing what he's going to do, and it doesn't matter what I do, but it does. It does. That is why Samuel brings this to the people. If, then leave that behind. Quit worshiping in those ways. So I think the thing that I would give us today in kind of bringing this podcast to land the plane on the podcast would be this, that, like, if you're going to follow the Lord with all of your heart, then what is it that doesn't belong? What is it that needs to go? And consider sitting down and journaling it out, or taking some time and prayerfully bringing those things before the Lord to say, Lord, these things don't belong in my life. Like, there may be habits, situations, circumstances, all kinds of things may need to change, but the motivation for those needs to be to follow the Lord with your whole heart. That if you've said he is your God and you've given yourself to him, then we then take seriously the call to be devoted to him in that kind of singular way. And then, like everything we do in the rest of life is meant to be a reflection of that. For instance, in marriage, we would be singularly devoted to our spouses because our marriages represent the singular devotion and covenant and faithfulness between God and his people, and that we would care for and be devoted to the good and the well-being of our children. And because, again, that's what God does for us. And so God's commitment to us, our relationship with him, those two things serve then as pattern and structure and frame of reference for really the rest of our lives. But it begins with loving him with our whole heart. And loving him with your whole heart means not loving the things of this world. And so we learn to hold tightly to the things that are the Lord's and that belong to him and that honor him. We learn to hold loosely to the things that we don't have to have. And then we learn to push away the things that don't belong and that don't fit with Christ. And so if it can't fit with Christ, then it shouldn't be in our lives. Listen, I hope this helps you in your day-to-day and your week-to-week relationship with the Lord and with other people. And feel free, share this, like this, comment. We would love to know what God's doing in your life. Please let us know if you want to reach out to us through any of our social media platforms here at Harrisburg. We would love to know and be able to pray for you. But if you want to love the Lord with your whole heart, then let's get rid of the stuff that doesn't belong. And none of us are perfect. Nobody's perfect. But we can try to honor the Lord with our lives. And that means getting rid of the stuff that doesn't belong. Listen, stay rooted in the Word, and I will see you again next time.